Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second episode of CB's Gold MMA show. I got a lot of news to cover. If you're new to the show, I'm using this as a platform to inform everyone about organizations such as the UFC, Bellator, World Series of Fighting, Invicta, Titan FC, RFA, some other organizations. I'm going to keep you updated with fight news, fight updates, announcements, fight changes, injuries, interviews, and the anti-doping violations, and any other things that are involved in the world of MMA. So let's jump right into it. We got a lot to cover. The first thing I want to discuss, first off, is rest in peace, Ryan Gimo. Ryan was, if you don't know, he was a UFC fighter. He made his debut against Anthony Perosh and got the knockout in 7 seconds with a beautiful straight right and some quick ground and pound. Um, Ryan was involved in an altercation a few days ago in Edmonton, and he was leaving what I think was a H2O lounge, and he had an incident with two guys that I guess wanted to fight or get into it with him, and he decided to walk away. And instead of the two of them walking away, they jumped in their pickup truck and they hit him with their car, took off, almost struck another car while trying to get away from the scene, and he was taken away in an ambulance and he died due to injuries sustained in the accident. Ryan was 34 years old, very talented and promising MMA fighter. And from anyone that's met him, says he was a joy to be around, a really fun guy. So it's sad. But rest in peace, Ryan Gimo. Quick update on it is an arrest has been made. Two suspects were apprehended and charged in the incident. So at least there will be a little bit of justice. I know they found the guy's car that was caught on a video or a photo yesterday or the day before. So Ryan is Ryan's justice has been served. Unfortunately, we had to lose him. Um, so it's very sad. And another fighter we've lost this week is Amar Suluev. So rest in peace, Amar Suluev. If you don't know Amar Suluev, he was in the UFC many years ago. He fought at UFC 35 and UFC 37 against Chuck Liddell and Phil Baroni. Took both losses. He also fought in Pride as well as many other organizations. He had fought Dean Thomas. He had fought Dean Lister. He had fought Chael Sonnen. There was a ton of names that Amar had competed against. He retired from MMA back in 2007. And unfortunately, the other day, he died from stomach cancer at 44 years old. So rest in peace, Amar. Rest in peace, Ryan Gimo. It's been a tough year for combat sports athletes. Um, I just hope it gets better. There's too many of these hit and runs lately. We Ryan Gimo, Jordan Parsons. I know Vanderlei Silva was hit while riding his bike, and we've lost some others. It's been real tough this year. Kimbo and Kevin Randleman due to heart failure. So hopefully the streak stops, does not continue. It's really tough to lose athletes like that when you know them pretty much from like a one-on-one basis because it is a one-on-one sport. So it's real tough to deal with. Condolences to friends and family of everyone involved in the passings over the last few months this year. And yeah, in other news, I'm sure you all have heard that BJ Penn was removed from his UFC 199 fight after testing, admitting to using an IV for his training camp back in March 25th, I think was the day. He had admitted it on his pre-fight screening, getting ready for UFC 199, and so they said, you can't do that. We're pulling you from the card, and we're going to have you meet with the athletic commission. BJ has accepted a 6 month suspension, but it is retroactive to the failure date of March 25th. So he will be eligible to fight in September. I know there had been voiced opinions of him versus GSP in the third fight for them um, coming up at the end of this year. So we'll see what happens next with BJ. I don't think he's done. I think he's going to want to come back, get in the cage, and test his mettle, see if he's ready to come back. So that's just the beginning of things. So good luck to BJ. I hope you get a good fight, get to come back. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time, that's for sure. And so we'll see what happens with that. Um, there's been a lot of fight announcements, fight changes, so I'm going to try and keep them event by event so it's easier to follow along with. UFC 202 has been given quite a few fights. Um, I know there was a fight that was supposed to happen recently or coming up, I think actually. It was coming up in Chicago. Anthony Rumble Johnson and Glover Teixeira. Anthony dropped out, and they had decided that they're just going to postpone the fight. It wasn't worth it to put him against other guys. It is what I think is a title eliminator. So it has been moved to UFC 202, which is McGregor Diaz 2. It's the co-main event, and like I discussed last week and earlier, it's Anthony Rumble against Glover Teixeira. Great 205 fight. Should be a number one contender fight. And, again, I got Rumble in this. I think I don't think Glover has the wrestling to take Rumble down. As we've seen, he defended all Phil Davis's takedowns, and so I think Phil's a better wrestler than Glover, and they both got heavy hands. But I think Rumble has heavier hands, and I think he's hungrier, and he wants that shot again. And either one, whoever wins, they'll should get the winner of John Jones Daniel Cormier next Saturday, UFC 200. Huge fight coming up. So whoever wins that fight next Saturday, they should definitely be watching this fight between Rumble and Glover to see who they could face next. Another fight that was added, I think yesterday, which I'm very excited for. Carlos Condit is returning. I know after the Lawler fight, he said, "I want a rematch for the belt, or I'm going to retire." He tried to use that strong arm technique against the UFC. I guess they talked to him and figured something out to where he's going to return at UFC 202 and take on Damian Maia. So this is a really good stylistic matchup. Carlos Condit is really good everywhere. Great striking, decent wrestling, good submissions. But we all know that Damian Maia is the submission ace. One of the best, if not the best, grappler, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter in the UFC. And ever since dropping a welterweight, he's just been killing it. So I'm really excited for that fight. To analyze it, like I said, if Maia can't get a takedown on Condit, it's going to be a long night for him because Condit's heavy-handed, got some nice knockouts, great striking, great kicks, punches, everything. Heavy knees, heavy elbows. So Damian Maia has to shoot, has to get that takedown. If he does, I could see him submitting Carlos. If he doesn't get it and it stays on feet, like I said, I think Carlos wins that fight, outpoints him, probably knocks him out. So we'll have to see what happens. But styles make fights, and this is a great fight. This also could be a title eliminator because Carlos he's always on the cusp of that title shot. He's never really been, two or three fights away. He's always fighting to get to that belt, get that shot again. And I'd love to see him against Lawler again. I know Lawler's got to get by Tyron Woodley first. But Lawler Condit too would be great. Condit Woodley would be great. But, at the same time, Damian Maia versus Lawler or Woodley would be great. Tyron's got great wrestling, but you don't want to take Damian down because he's got great submissions off his back. But it goes into it again. If Maia gets Lawler, then he has to get that takedown early or use the clinch, get some trips like he likes to do against the cage, work the submissions, work his positioning. And, that's what he's got to do. But I'm not going to get that ahead of myself right now, just brushing over it. So Carlos Condit, Damian Maia in a 170, what should be a title eliminator. Another 170 fight that was announced, which is very interesting, is Donald Cowboy Cerrone, who's staying at welterweight, will return at UFC 202, which is only a couple months away. He's going to fight Rick Story. We know Cerrone recently got that beautiful dominant win over Patrick Cote, which a lot of people were counting him out of, but you can never count Cerrone out. And Rick Story just fought at the Almeida Garbrandt card, which I was there for, against Tarek Safadine. And it's an interesting matchup because Story, he fought Tarek, and Cerrone fights a lot of the same. A lot of Muay Thai, range, kicks, staying on the outside. And Rick Story's game is getting into that clinch, getting into the dirty boxing, closing the distance. Same way he did against Tarek. He got him against the cage and just threw heavy body shots. So, Story getting inside on Cowboy is not easy. Cowboy's got great movement and great striking, stays ranged, but he also has great submissions. So if you put Cerrone on his back, which Rick Story might try to do, but Story throws up a lot of triangles. He throws up a lot of submissions off his back, great movement. So it's a very interesting fight. Another step up in competition for Cowboy. And, I like Cowboy at 170. A lot of guys were saying, um, it's a weird jump for him. He's better at 155. He may be small at 170, but I don't think he's small for 170, and I think he's proven that he does very well there and could continue up the rungs of the ladder. So we'll have to wait till August 20th, I think it is, to see Cerrone take on Story, and we'll see what happens there. Strangely enough, in another 170-pound matchup that was announced, I think earlier today or late yesterday, Neil Magny returns at 170, and Neil Magny. He's been doing very well. He's on a 3-fight win streak. He beat Eric Silva by decision. He beat Kelvin Gastelum by decision. A lot of people say Kelvin won that fight, but he did get the decision. And then in March of this year, he fought Hector Lombard, and he finished Hector in what people were saying, should have been stopped in the first for Hector, should have been stopped in the second for Neil. Neil got the third round TKO. He's fighting against the returning Dong Yun Kim. And a lot of people are probably saying, oh, we just saw Dong Yun Kim. Well, there are two Dong Yun Kims, strangely enough, in the UFC. The 155er just fought at 199. But this is the 170-pound stun gun. And he is coming off of a submission win against Joshua Berkman at 187, as well as a TKO against Dominic Waters back in November. So it's been a little while since we've seen Stun Gun in there, but it'll be interesting to see his return. He's got great judo throws, decent striker, somewhat of a power striker, has a couple knockouts. But I do know Tyron Woodley knocked him out bad in a minute, I think on the Bisping Kung Lee card, if I'm not mistaken. So this is an interesting matchup. I think Neil has the distance, as he does have like an 80 or an 81-inch reach at 170, which is unbelievable. Very, very long arms. So that'll be interesting to see how that works out. I'm going to go with Neil Magny, though. Like, I've counted him out many times, and a lot of people that I know have counted him out before, and you just can't anymore. So it'll be interesting to see this fight at 202. I'm sure they're going to spread out the three 170s. I don't know if they'll do them back to back to back, but we're still rounding out the card, figuring out what's going on. I know we also got Cody Garbrandt and Takei Mizukaki on the card at 135. I think that's a quick night for Cody. I think he knocks out Mizukaki real quick. And then another one that was announced is a women's bantamweight fight, 135, between Raquel Pennington and Elizabeth Phillips. Elizabeth Phillips has coming off of that victory over Jessamine Duke, which was a while ago. I don't think Liz Phillips has fought in a while. So it'll be interesting to see how she comes back. Good fighter. I think she has better ground than stand up, and Rocky, as we know, is well rounded, but very good striker. Rocky's coming off that split decision win over Betch Kohea, which was another phenomenal fight, a throwdown fight. Always love watching Rocky fight. Tough girl, gritty, always comes to play. She always comes to just throw it down in the cage. So 202 is shaping up real nicely. I like the card so far. It's stacked. It's going to be at the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas, which is the same arena that's hosting UFC 200 next week. 201 is in Atlanta. 203 is in Cleveland. So 202, I think, is August 20th. Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz rematch. And we're going to get a lot of good fights in that T-Mobile Arena. So looking forward to this one for sure. The next numbered pay-per-view has received two new fights, UFC 203, as I just said, in Cleveland. CM Punk will supposedly make his Octagon debut. And I say supposedly because I don't know, man. He's dodged more fights than anybody I've heard of, and he's only ever had one opponent. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if he actually makes it there. We got some time till 203, so he could come up with another random surgery. So we'll see what happens. But if he does make it into that octagon, he will be facing off against Mickey Gall, who, if you don't know, beat Mike Jackson at Hendricks versus Thompson fight night in Vegas many months ago in February, which I was there for. And I saw CM Punk get in the octagon, shake Mickey's hand. And so it should be an interesting fight. We'll see what happens. Um, I think Mickey Gall destroys him, and that's putting my bias against CM Punk aside. I know a lot of people know that I've got my issues with him based on personal interactions, but that's neither here nor there right now. I think he's jumping into deep water, and I think Mickey Gall is going to welcome him to the UFC, and I think Mickey can win any way he wants. He hits hard. He's got great submissions. So, and I know CM Punk recently said it's not far fetched to talk about a title shot for him. Let's do your first fight first before we start talking about 170-pound title shots. You got a lot of time and a lot of fights to go before you're anywhere near that belt. And even looking at the top five right now, I mean, I don't even think CM Punk breaks top 10, if top 15. But that's just my personal opinion. You know, there's been a few WWE or professional wrestlers that have come into MMA, not just the UFC, and haven't done well. I think the most notable one that did well was Brock Lesnar, which we're going to see him return to the cage next week against Mark Hunt. So we'll see how that goes. But I don't know. I'm not at Rufus Sport, but I just don't see CM Punk doing well, and I think Mickey Gall's a tough test for his first fight. So we'll see what happens. Another fight that was announced actually earlier today, I think on UFC Tonight, is a 155-pound lightweight fight between Eric Koch, who's coming off of that victory over Shane Campbell that was at Almeida Garbrandt, which I was at. As I said, Eric Koch looked very dominant in his return. I think it was 2 years since he was in there. So he'll come back. He's fighting again at 155, and he's going to fight Drew Dober. Drew Dober, you might know, he choked out Jamie Varner real quick and retired him. And then he had that really, really controversial tap, no tap to, I think, Leandro Silva a while back that the ref got pretty badly wrong because I don't remember him tapping. So this is a great fight, you know. Drew's good on the feet. Eric's got real good striking coming out of Rufus Sport. Both have really good jiu-jitsu. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a really good fight. I'm actually looking forward to this one a lot. So it should be a good scrap between the two. Drew Dober always brings it. Eric Koch always brings it. So it'll be a good fight. Looking forward to it. The next event I would like to discuss is UFC Fight Night South Dakota. This fight was supposed to be headlined by Michael Chiesa and Tony Ferguson. Michael Chiesa is out with some back problems that he's going to need to get taken care of. And they scrambled a little bit for an opponent for Ferguson, weren't sure who to take. Some people were saying Khabib, some people were saying Cowboy. Khabib, I was informed, cannot take that fight because it is during Ramadan and he won't fight during Ramadan. And Cowboy has now been, they had other things in mind for him. So he's been booked for the 170 pound fight I discussed earlier. So Ferguson has an opponent. His name is Landon Venata. Venata has fought, he hasn't fought anybody that I've heard of. I looked up his record. He is undefeated, if I'm not mistaken. He's 8-0. He fought once in RFA, but this is a big step up. You know, Tony Ferguson is one of the top dogs at 155, and so it'll be interesting to see how Landon does. I think Tony's super hungry. He wants that title shot. He's still gunning for that Khabib fight. So I got Ferguson in this. The interesting thing about it, though, and something that you guys should be paying attention to, is it has been moved from the main event slot to the co-main event slot. So Ferguson is no longer in the main event slot. He's been moved to co-main, and John Lineker who's facing off against Michael McDonald at a 135 fight, will be moved up to the main event. that's actually an unbelievable 135-pound fight. Um, Lineker, after losing at 120 at 125 pounds and being told, you missed weight so many times, you got to go up. He's 4-0 at 135. So it's an interesting fight. He has a knockout over Altakin Oskalic. Um, and he also has he had a decision over Ian McCall, who you guys know is Uncle Creepy. He had a submission over Francisco Rivera after they slugged the shit out of each other. And most recently at UFC 198 in Brazil, he had a decision win over Rob Font. So that's he's riding a nice little wave at 135. And Michael McDonald, otherwise known as Mayday. He had lost to Uriah Faber by guillotine in 2013, and then wasn't seen for almost about little over 2 years. Came back at UFC 195 back in January and fought Masanori Kanehara and choked him out with a rear naked choke. Got a performance of the night bonus in the second round. So this is a good fight for the two guys. Lineker, as we know, is just a slugger, but Mayday has the reach. Mayday has a decent chin, good striking, but Lineker hits like a fucking freight train. So I think Lineker, he has to get inside, start swinging on him. If he can land, I think McDonald goes down. If McDonald gets the takedown, I think it's going to be it's going to be interesting. Can Lineker get up from it and use some form of wrestling or jiu-jitsu to kind of break the guard or break the position and get back up? But I think more than likely it'll end up mostly on the feet. That's at least what I'm hoping for. And as a main event, I really like this fight. It's a very underrated 135-pound fight. So we'll have to see what happens. But I never really been able to go against Lineker. I love the guy. I love watching him fight. He's a really good guy. And now that he's at 135 and the cut's easier for him, it's an eventual slugfest, possibly fight of the night on that card. So it should be a good time. A women's 135 fight that has been added between Lauren Murphy is returning after her February fight of the night performance against the newcomer Kelly Fajolts that she won in the third round, I think with like 5 or 6 seconds left in the fight. She knocked the girl out, got a nice TKO. She's fighting a newcomer named Caitlin Chukagian. I don't know a lot about this girl. I know she's undefeated. She's 7-0. She hasn't fought she fought in WSOF about almost 2 years ago. She fought in WSOF, I think, and hasn't really fought any of the names I've heard of, but she did have a submission win over Andrea Lee, who we know from Invicta, Andrea KGB Lee, or Andrea, whatever you want to call her. But that was back in the amateurs. So I think this is a good fight. I like Lauren Murphy in this fight. Lauren's awesome, real nice girl, and very tough out for anybody. Just a tough chick. So should be a good 135 fight. I hope if Lauren Murphy wins, she gets somebody that's not a newcomer, so she can hopefully make her way up the ladder a little bit. And one last fight that I found out was announced is returning with pretty quickly Sam Alvey, Smiling Sam, who fought, I think last week or the week before, he fought Elias Theodoro on the Ottawa card, and he just didn't look himself. He wasn't throwing a lot of punches. I think he landed less than like 10 strikes that fight, and Elias got the win. But Sam is making a quick return. He's going to face off against a guy who was actually on The Ultimate Fighter right now. Not to throw out spoilers, but this was last week, so I hope you're paying attention to The Ultimate Fighter this season. A guy named Eric Spicely, who fought Andrew Sanchez last week in the semifinals to get into the finals. Unfortunately, Eric Spicely was knocked out early in the first round by Andrew Sanchez, and Sanchez punched his ticket to the finale. So watching that, it'll be interesting to see because, Sanchez is more of a grappler. and but he went out there and knocked out Eric Spicely. And Sam Alvey hits real hard. He's Dan Henderson training partner, trains out there in Temecula with him, and I like Sam in this fight. I like Sam by knockout, whichever round he pretty much decides it. But I wouldn't be shocked in a first round. So we'll see. Um, should be a great fight. I'm really looking forward to it. Always like Sam fighting. Sam's just a nice guy, great dude. It was tough to watch him last week against Elias Theodoro. That was tough for me to watch. Um, so hopefully he rebounds and gets back in there and puts up the W. Another one that I've been getting a lot of tweets about because I did call it on the MMA Roasted podcast. Rowdy Beck Rawlings is returning to fight in Vancouver. And she's facing off against a girl that we haven't seen, if I'm not mistaken, since December. Paige Van Zandt returns to the octagon after doing Dancing with the Stars, being a finalist, a runner-up in Dancing with the Stars season. Paige returns, and she'll be facing Rowdy Beck. I like this fight. I like this fight a lot. We were talking to Rowdy Beck on the Roasted podcast. I think it was last week or the week before, and she wouldn't say who she was fighting because it wasn't official yet. But I threw out the first name I threw out was PVZ, and I ended up being right. So that's pretty cool. I think this is a great fight. Rowdy Beck's got heavy hands, throws a lot of combos, power punches. She's got good jiu-jitsu, good wrestling. She trains out of Alliance when she gets the chance. So, she's training with killers over there. Paige Van Zandt is alpha male, great wrestling team. She's got decent striking, better jiu-jitsu than her striking. So, but we'll see how she rebounds because Paige got dominated by Rose Namajunas. And I think that was tough for her. So we'll see how she rebounds. Um, I can never really go against Rowdy Beck. I love that girl. I love watching her fight. She's such a sweetheart. Plus, I think she's like the hottest MMA fighter in the UFC in terms of females. But I think it could stay on the feet, and Beck's going to work with Dominic, and Paige is going to work with Uriah. So wrestling, it could end up equal, and so I think it could stay on the feet. I think Beck can lump her up, and maybe knock her out, get the TKO. We'll see what happens. But very much looking forward to that fight. Great 115-pound women's fight. So it'll be a good time. Um, the last thing I want to cover was before I do the Q&A, of course, is I read an interview this earlier today from Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who is the 115-pound women's strawweight champion in the UFC. She's fighting next Friday night against Claudia, defending her title in their rematch, which is now going to be a 5-rounder, contrary to their first fight, which was a 3-rounder. But Joanna is confident in her victory over Claudia next week, retaining her title. And she thinks that after she beats Claudia Gadelha, that feud will be put to rest and she can move on to other feuds, other fights, whatever, defending her title. But she did say if she beats, well, not if, she said after she beats Claudia Gadelha, she wants to pursue the women's 125-pound title. And I know we just recently had our first women's 125-pound fight between JoJo Calderwood and Valerie Letourneau. I don't know if the UFC is 100% bringing in a 125-pound division for the women. So we'll have to see if they do. If they do, it could be an option for her. I know there's a lot of girls that would like to fluctuate, whether down from 135 or up from 115, as well as Invicta has a hell of a flyweight division. So you can bring in a lot of great girls from over there. But Joanna said she wants to be the first ever women's 2-division champion in the UFC. So, I'm not going to count her out. Joanna's a hell of a fighter, as you all know. We've all seen she's just a fucking just destructive force. So I'm not going to count her out from it if they introduce 125. I like the idea. Don't know if the UFC will go for it, if they'll let her, move up and weight and keep the title. I don't know if she wants to be a simultaneous champ or just a 2-division champ in general, like a Randy Couture or a BJ Penn has. So we'll have to see what happens. I'm excited for it. But the first thing we need to worry about is Joanna Claudia 2 next Friday, July 8th, Ultimate Fighter 23 finale. So that's the fight to look forward to. And by the way, folks, early next week, I will be putting out a show where I cover all my predictions for all three events. I may do individual shows for each event just because it might be a little easier so you could just see each one in its own. So if you wanted to just see 200, you don't have to watch, the Eddie Alvarez, Dos Anjos predictions and the tough predictions. But we'll see. Don't know if I can do the tough finale one before before Thursday, just because the Ultimate Fighter finalists. We're gonna have another one. We're gonna have the first woman tonight. I haven't watched the episode yet. I know other people have, but the other two finalists for the girls and the guys, I think, will be decided next week. So that one I'll have to probably put out Thursday. But the Alvarez Dos Anjos card I will put out early next week because we know everybody, and I'll probably put out the UFC 200 before that as well, because we already know the card. So yeah, just look out for those. Those will be good shows. They'll be my first prediction shows, and I'm gonna start tallying and see how well I do with predictions, and y'all can rate me, and we can battle back and forth with predictions, and we'll go from there. So it should be a fun time. So next up, I'm gonna jump into my Q&A. I always want to finish with the Q&A. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go to my Twitter questions from my peeps. We got some good questions this past week that I asked for. So the first one I'm gonna cover is from Austin Van Bree, Twitter tag at @AVanBree23. Any new fights added to UFC Salt Lake City? Well, let's go ahead and quickly cover that card. That's the Yair Rodriguez Alex Caceres Fight Night 92. It's out in Salt Lake. Strangely enough, which is relevant to my show because it's my show, that card happens on my birthday. So I hope all my picks win because that'll be a great birthday present. But that's August 6th. 2016. If I'll be 31, if you're thinking about sending me a gift, hey man, hit me up on Twitter, and I accept gifts. I don't turn them down. So yeah, but I'm also accepting a gift as a UFC great card. So we discussed Rodriguez and Caceres. We discussed Swanson and Kawajiri. There are other fights on there that I haven't covered. The first one we've got is Court McGee and Dominique Steele. It's a good fight. Court's a great wrestler, great grappler. Always like watching him fight. He's a super cool dude. He's had some an interesting back and forth. His last loss was in April. He fought Santiago Ponzinibbio, who was actually also on this card. He got TKO'd in the first round. So it'll be a nice rebound for Court McGee. I know uses wrestling, good striker. I know he trains out of the Pit with John Hackelman. So we'll see what happens with that. And then Dominique Steele. Dominique Steele is he's a tough guy. His last fight was also a loss. He lost to Danny Hot Chocolate Roberts by decision at UFC 197, which I actually thought that Dominique won that fight. It was a very controversial decision, but it did get fight of the night. Before that, he won by knockout from a slam back in November against Dong Yun Kim, and that was at that was at an event. He pulled it off nicely. So they're both good grapplers. It's a good fight. Can't really pick a dog in that one yet, but I don't even think you're asking me that, so I'm not even going to try. And then speaking of Ponzinibbio, the next fight that's on the card that's been announced is Santiago Ponzinibbio against Zach Cummings. Ponzinibbio, it has been he's been doing decent. I know the finish over Court was a big deal because it's tough to finish Court McGee by knockout. Also had back in December a TKO over Andreas Saul. But before that, last June, actually a year ago now, he got knocked out by Lorenz Larkin, which is not, Lorenz Larkin is no slouch. Very tough fight for anybody that did get fight of the night. So it's an interesting matchup for him. Zach Cummings is more of a grappler. He's out of that Glory Fitness and MMA with Megan Anderson, the 145er from Invicta. He is he's training with James Krause and Tim Elliott and what's the guy's name? Andrew. I think it's Andrew Gutierrez. We've had him on the Roasted Show a bunch of times. He does the best press conferences. Um, so, Cummings is coming off of two wins. He actually beat a guy that we talked about in the previous fight. He knocked out Dominique Steele back in July and then had a nice decision over Nicholas Dalby back in April. So this is a great fight. Styles make fights, as I always say. So, again, I'm not picking a dog, but, I like the fight. It looks good. The other fight that has been recently announced is a middleweight matchup between Talis Latis and Chris Camozzi. Camozzi's coming off that really dominant victory over Vitor Miranda from the Almeida Garbrandt card. I was there. I expected a better showing from Vitor, but Camozzi just shut him down, just busted him up, bloodier than I've ever seen Vitor, and just demolished him in that fight. Camozzi's a tough out for anybody. It's a really good fight. But he's got a tough test. So Camozzi's coming off the win, and he's actually facing Talis Latis, who's coming off of 2 losses. Latis lost the split decision to Michael Bisping, and then he lost a decision to Gegard Mousasi, which I thought Talis was going to win. I picked Talis to win that fight. He ended up losing the unanimous. But before that, he was on a tear, just beating everybody. Submitting Tim Boach. I think he knocked out Francis Carmont, and he had beaten Ed Herman and Tom Watson. So I like the fight. I think it's a good fight for both. Talis is a good striker. Camozzi is just a fucking beast on the feet. Just loves to get hit, loves to throw hands. So it's a good fight. I think Camozzi can pull it off. It's one of his bigger tests to date. I know he's fought Jacare twice, but let's be realistic here. This is one of the bigger tests. Talis Latis, former title challenger, fought Anderson Silva. So we'll see what happens with this one. And then the last fight that was announced recently, which is an unbelievable matchup. I like both these guys. I love watching them fight. You got Dennis the Menace Bermudez coming back to face off against a guy who hasn't been around for a while. I know he did get popped for a PED thing. Honey Jason. You may remember Honey Jason. He did very well in his first few outs in the UFC. He knocked out Sam Sicilia. I know he got knocked out by Jeremy Stevens, and that really upset him. And then he knocked out Steven Seiler. Lost the split decision at the Tough Brazil 3 finale. I think that was like 2 years ago. To Robbie Peralta. And then back in May of last year, Honey Jason submitted Damon Jackson, but then he got popped for a diuretic, so he was suspended. And so he's coming back to fight Bermudez. Bermudez is coming off the decision over Kawajiri a few months ago. But before that, it was submitted by Ricardo Lamas and then knocked out with that crazy flying knee off the cage from Jeremy Stevens. So this is a good 145-pound fight. It's a good fight on the feet. In my opinion, I think Bermudez can take it. He's got the better wrestling. They've both got great striking, but Bermudez hits really, really hard. And we've seen Honey's chin go out. So I don't know. I hope Honey pulls it off, but I'm not gonna pick a dog right now. I like both guys. They're both awesome. So we'll go from there and just see what happens. So Austin, that's the updates on the Salt Lake City card. So there you go with that one. Our next question, actually, we have 3 questions from one person, JTT2 at Todoroff Law. First question he asked me, who would be on your MMA Mount Rushmore? Oh, man, I only get to pick 4 people, so this one's tough for me. because it could go many ways. Do we go UFC? Do we go all organizations? Do we go legacy? Do we go records? Do we go, there's so many things. And it's like, the people that you would want to put on years ago that are the greatest have had, tough times since then, like Fedor or Dan Hendo or BJ Penn, Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell. Everybody has their downside. Unfortunately, nobody stays undefeated forever. So my four, if I had to pick, I would go probably Pioneers because it's Mount Rushmore. And in my opinion, and I'm not going super far back to the very beginning, one person I am, Hoist Gracie's number one. Hoist got to go on there. I mean, if it wasn't for him, I don't know if MMA would be the way it is right now. So, Hoist Gracie, I would put. Fuck, I hate this question because no matter what, there's criticism that's possible. Um, I'd put Randy Couture. Randy started in the early days and two division champ. And, I know he got beat by other guys and all those things. But, in terms of legacy and pioneering, in terms of being one of the biggest names, one of the most important names, Randy Couture. So we got Hoist, Randy. Um, Fuck, the other two. It's tough. I would say BJ Penn. I'm a little biased. Another two division champion. Trained with BJ before. BJ's a friend. I love the guy. I would put BJ because of the fact that he was kind of like the pioneer of some of the lighter weight divisions. I know there were champs before that and whatnot, but BJ kind of with that 155 and then going up to 170 and doing that stuff. I would have to put BJ on there. Just one of the guys that started early and win or lose, guy always shows up to fight and he's got a legacy to him. So you got to put him on there. The fourth person, it's tough. It's a really tough question. And I know I've said that a bunch of times already. It's a really tough question. The fourth one, I don't know. I'd have to say Chuck Liddell. And I'm sure I'm gonna finish this recording and be like, no, I should have said this guy. I should have put that guy. I'd put Chuck. You know, Chuck is the reason I got into MMA. That's for sure. He was my first favorite fighter. Very successful, unstoppable for a long time, and he's the guy that a lot of people wanted to emulate. A lot of people were going, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be in. You couldn't get Chuck down, and if you couldn't get him down, you're getting punched in the face, you're getting lumped up. So, I love Chuck Liddell. So those would be my four. You got Hoist, Randy, BJ, Chuck Liddell, Mount Rushmore. I'm done with that question. Next question from my boy JTT. Do you want and or care if GSP comes back? If so, what is the matchup you want to see? Well, here you go. Do I want him to come back? It'd be cool to see him come back. Do I care if he comes back? No, I got over that a long time ago. He's been out 3 years. I've gotten over it. It's not the biggest deal to me anymore. If he does come back, who do I want him to fight? There's only one fight I want to see from him. They're talking about all these new matchups with, Bisping at 185 and BJ Penn at 155. No. I want to see one fight, and I know they're both beyond their prime, but I still want to see it because it was the most teased, most speculated, but never happened fight from the moment I got into MMA until the moment that GSP walked out the door 3 years ago. George St. Pierre, Anderson the Spider Silva, let's put this shit to bed already. GSP, Anderson Silva, I want to see it. That's the return fight. If he only does one fight, that's the fight I want to see. GSP and Anderson, let's make it happen. Start hashtag GSP Anderson. Let's get it going. Let's make it fucking happen. That's the fight. So there you go, JT. Last one from my boy JT. Do you think more fighters will try to emulate Conor Wonderboy Machida Karate elusive type style rather than Muay Thai? There's a couple parts to this question. First off, at this point, I'm removing Machida from the equation because as Machida got later into his career, and I don't know if he's done, but he did get popped, so he's out a year or whatever it is. He may never come back. He got removed once people kind of figured out what he was doing. So when he lost to Shogun the second time in their second fight, I know he did get some other wins and he had some nice victories, but more often than not, in my opinion, he wasn't a very offensive karate style fighter. He was more of a defensive counter striker. So that's why I separate him from a guy like Connor or Stephen Wonderboy Thompson because of the fact that they are offensive. I know Wonderboy uses a lot of counters, Connor uses a lot of counters, but they're also offensive. They go in there, Connor goes in and he just throws. Wonderboy goes in and once he gets comfortable, he throws. I'm excusing the Rory fight, but again, when a counter striker's fighting a counter striker, you can't really counter a counter when nobody's throwing an offensive one to begin with. Do I think Do I think it's better to be emulated than Muay Thai? There's differences. The karate uses a lot of straight punches, and a lot of elusive punches, and they use a lot of straight kicks, some spinning kicks, stuff like that. Muay Thai, if you're practicing full Muay Thai, you're using all 8 limbs. You're using your hands, your elbows, your knees, and your feet. And Muay Thai, it's a little bit different. Do I think more people are going to emulate the new style? Well, that's kind of how MMA is. When people see, this is doing very well, maybe I need to learn this to get the jump or to get the edge. It's a periodic thing because for a while it was only wrestlers and ground and pound. Then it was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the beginning, and then after that it was let's learn kickboxing or let's learn boxing, and then learn karate and judo, and it's a periodic thing. It seems to be what's working, and most MMA gyms don't really separate a lot of things. But karate, more often than not, you have to go to a karate school. But do I think karate will be emulated more? Yes, I think so, definitely. Do I think Muay Thai is on the way out? No way. No way. I just think that, like I said, it's the periodic thing. It's when you feel that that's what's working right now, that's what you want to learn. So we'll just have to see. Evolution is a bitch in this sport because there's always something new coming. So we'll have to wait and see. So there you go, JT. Those are your 3 questions. I appreciate the input, man. I appreciate it. The last question is Clark from Clark Canfield. Sorry for fucking that up. At Clark Canfield 1. How would you see Cruz versus Caraway? I think it might be very interesting. Caraway should talk more trash, take notes from Mac. I'm guessing that's Mystic Mac, Conor McGregor, the King of Dublin. Here's the thing. First off, the trash talking from Caraway. I've been saying this for a little while that, Caraway, it's not really something where he is the issue. I think he needs to just kind of make a name for himself. And I know he has in the cage, but outside, more often than not, he's referred to as Mr. Misha Tate and made the jokes and whatever. He needs to speak up for himself, kind of separate himself from it a bit. I know he did that a fair amount with his win over Aljamain because a lot of people were counting him out. Do I want him to shit talk? I don't know about that. Just keep performing in the cage and just saying this is what I want. Do I think he deserves Dominic Cruz right now? No. I don't. I think he needs probably one more fight. And I like Aljamain, but Aljamain is not the gatekeeper to the 135 belt right now. Cruz versus Caraway, how does it go? I think Cruz beats him. Cruz's footwork is better. His head movement is better. If Caraway tries to take him down or grind him with the wrestling, Cruz's wrestling is tip-top as well. Brian may have a little bit better jiu-jitsu, but like I said, you got to get Dominic down, and if you don't get him down, you got to hit him. And nobody's really been able to hit him that much. So I think Cruz wins that. Do I think he finishes Caraway? Probably not. I think he takes a unanimous decision. Probably 4-1, maybe 5-0. So that's my answer, Clark. Thanks for the question. That concludes the Q&A session, and that concludes our show for the night. Um, we don't have any fights coming up this weekend, so we'll just have to wait till the monumentous week that is next week, International Fight Week. Shout out to all my guys going to International Fight Week next week in Vegas. Have a hell of a time. Enjoy the fights. Like I said, I will put out my predictions next week. Um, and you know what? It's been awesome. Thank you guys for checking out my show. Thank you for all the views. We passed over 300 views in the first episode, which I think I recorded last week. So I really appreciate it. I love you guys so much. Look out for new episodes. Like I said, I'm doing the predictions ones coming up. Also, you can catch me on MMA Roasted. I'm on MMA Roasted. I'm a co-host on there. I'm sure most of you guys know. We recorded one today. We had Bubba Jenkins back in studio. It was awesome to have him back. We talked about some of our predictions for the upcoming fight cards. So look out for that. I know Adam's in town next week in Vegas. If you want to go see his comedy show, he's there, I think, Monday to Friday and Sunday. Hit him up on Twitter at Adam Comedian or at MMA Roasted. I think he can hook you up to get him in a show. He's absolutely hilarious. He is a joy to work with. He's a joy to watch perform live. Super funny. So check him out. And yeah, you can find him on Twitter, MMA Roasted. And you can find me on Twitter. Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat at CB the Grenade. And you can find me on Facebook, CB Gold. If you add me on Facebook, please send me a message or shoot me a tweet beforehand or something that that tells me where how you know me or whatnot. A little protective of my Facebook ads based on some things that happen in my personal life. So yeah, just shoot me a message or a tweet and let me know that you added me on Facebook, and I'll add you back for sure. So keep looking out for the episodes. CB's Gold MMA show. I appreciate the followers. I appreciate the watches, the comments, the subscriptions. We're over 50 subscriptions already for YouTube. So I'm really excited about doing this. We should be having, I'm going to end up trying to get some guests in. I'm going to try and get Adam Hunter in. I spoke to Bubba Jenkins earlier about having him on one of the shows. So just look out for more shows. Again, thank you all very much. I love you guys so much. Enjoy the show. Enjoy UFC 200 and the preceding events. And we'll see you soon.